My guests on today's show are my husband and my dad. I sat down with them at separate times and just to ask them a few questions about this particular spring as it relates to farming. You know, I have never held myself out to be any sort of an agricultural expert by any means at all. And yet I also really do care about trying to be part of the movement to better educate people that have become disassociated from either the land or from farming in general. This spring has been a tough spring, and I put that in air quotes because you maybe have seen a lot of people that are connected to farming use that phrase. And so I just wanted to dig into a little bit more with my husband and my dad, what it really means to have a tough spring. And it's interesting, the first part of the interview, I was in the tractor with my husband while he was planting, and you can just see it, the information, it's right there. And then my dad sat down with me later in the weekend to share his perspective, having been a farmer for 51 years. And he shares just some interesting things to help us all keep it in perspective. But my hope is that you either learn something new or you feel less alone if you are in farming yourself. When the farmers have a down year like they may have, and I guess that will remain to be seen to some degree, but our whole economy suffers here in our local small town. And so it's just, hopefully this episode provides a little bit of perspective on what it is that they're actually facing, or make you ask some additional questions of your local farmers, because that's my biggest thing. If you want to know what's really going on with farming, talk to a farmer. Okay, enjoy this episode with my hubby and my dad.
I thought it would be interesting to talk to my husband, ask him a few questions, share a little bit of perspective. Now, granted, we are just one relatively small farm in North Dakota, and it doesn't look like this for everybody everywhere. But I just thought it'd be kind of fun to talk to my hubby a little bit. He is focusing, as you can see. But I'm going to ask some questions about some of the government programs that we use in seasons like this, in years like this, and why. And really how those programs are able to, they make it possible for us to continue farming when conditions would otherwise make it impossible. So, okay, honey, talk a little bit. There's Jeremiah. Tell us a little bit about what makes this particular year a challenging year for planting. Because it's June 6th today, right? Yep, June 6th today. And we normally are done planting by this point. So,
It's fair.
yeah, it's fair. So what is making this particularly challenging, and what the hell is prevent plant? Let's talk about that.
It's pretty self-explanatory if you look out the window and look at the water.
I took some stills of that, some pictures of that.
Well, that's what prevent plant is. Can't get into it. Can't plant it. So that's that's essentially all it is. It's just ground that you can't get into, can't get seeded.
Right. So then what happens with it? So prevent plant ground
Well,
are acres lost to flooding, generally speaking, right?
essentially.
So what does that actually mean for you, though?
That means
Like, what is this? What's
lost
this?
production.
Yep.
And it's
So
less ground.
what's the subsidy, and what does that do to prices too?
Well, it can generally make prices go up because their crop's not there.
Right. Demand and supply.
You know, but that
Right, less
doesn't
supply.
necessarily help you because you don't have a crop to sell.
Right.
So, and,
Right.
and your payment options, depending on levels, you can buy different levels through the insurance policies.
Let's see if I can get both of us in here. Yeah.
But
I don't think I can.
most of that stuff is you're getting 65% of what of a spring price, essentially.
And in a year like this, you can actually see the water behind him there that he was referring to. In a year like this, when so many states are accessing, I mean, so like, how does Prevent Plant work from a government level? Like, do they set aside so many dollars? How do they budget for Prevent Plant? I guess that's my question. How does the federal government...
It's all in the Farm Bill.
Yeah, so it's approved on a biennium?
5 years.
Every 5 years.
Yeah.
I have been in this tractor with my husband for maybe 15, maybe 20 minutes now since we first got in. And I swear we're just going in circles. Like
We have been going in circles.
Well, he says we have been. It's because we're going around sloughs and going around little bodies of water. But, like, I don't even get it. And he's like, well, you know, look at my map. I'm telling you, like, at least harvesting, I kind of get because you can see what you're taking off. We're here. There is nothing to go by. I would be terrible at this. Completely.
For me, where I felt like I wanted to talk about this was Jeremiah always throws out the phrase Prevent Plant, right? And I was like, what exactly? I mean, it's like I know kind of a little bit what it is, but I didn't understand, you know, where it came from. I asked him some questions like, is there Prevent Plant for different crops? I mean, and I'm assuming the payouts are different depending on the crop and the demand for it and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we tooled around in the field a couple days ago. I was going to say yesterday, but it was not yesterday. It's a few days ago. And, like, he was in a really wet field. It was the field that you would have, I don't know, what did you do to it?
Cultivate.
Yeah. Okay. It was not.
It's in cans, I suspect.
Yeah. It was not great. It was not great. And, you know, like looking out at the water, you can see corn stalks all the way through the middle of it. So you know that it was planted last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it would be interesting since, you know, now we've been back this is our 11th year back home, which is kind of wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Jeremiah said in the 11 years that he's been here, this is the worst spring that he can remember, just in terms of moisture. I mean, just so much wet. And he said a lot of people, and again, like the only reason to do this is just because I've posted a few times on social media, like, pray for us, pray for our farmers, pray for all the farmers, you know. But I don't think people always get it, you know. It's like, and then also, how does the Farm Bill tie into all of this? And what does that mean for people that aren't connected to farming? Because there's a lot I don't know, so I'm asking the people that do. And I thought since you had
whether I can answer that or not.
Well, no, I mean, I know. We'll kind of narrow it a bit. But so you've been at this a very long time, comparatively, right? So can you think of a spring, any other spring that was this wet?
No, I can't.
Yeah, so it's noteworthy, I think, right?
I agree.
So when you look at this spring, one of the things Jeremiah and I talked about a bit too was just like, I don't think the average person maybe is even aware of the fact that you have deadlines that you got to get your crop in for. It's federal crop insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you lose, for every day you lose
1%.
1% of coverage. So you can keep planting it, but then your crop isn't fully covered.
And usually it's 10 days after that, I believe, then they won't insure it at all.
Right. So you're running that risk of getting up to 90% insured, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that's you lose 1% a day. Yeah, I just think there's interesting things about it. So what do you think in terms of normal acres, what percent are you at in terms of actually planting?
Between 20-25% less than normal.
Okay. So then Prevent Plant, what do you have any idea like how that all started or when it started? Do you remember when it started?
No, it was one of the farm bills. It like in some of it was even way back. Well, I don't know if the Prevent Plant was in '88, but we had crop insurance in '88.
That was the first year of federal crop insurance?
Something like that. I'm not really sure of the years, but the idea of Prevent Plant was in a farm bill just to you know, the government sets policies to ensure our food supply.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of farmers that would say, I just wish the government would be out of it altogether,
Right.
which there's some merit in that. And it bothers me as a producer or as a businessman to be subsidized by the government, because the guy on Main Street in Oaks isn't
Is not,
subsidized when
right.
somebody doesn't walk through his door.
Right.
But the government isn't really telling him what he can sell and how much he's got to sell it for and all
Right.
of that type of stuff too. So if the government's going to regulate us and tell us where we can plant and how much of what we can plant, then I guess the average farmer doesn't feel too bad about taking a subsidy for
Right.
that,
Right.
because we're bound to their rules and regulations,
Right.
which is becoming more difficult all the time with environmental issues and
Tariffs.
tariffs. Well, it affects us a little bit, but majority of producers I talk to realize that we're just caught in the middle of this thing, because you can't continue to let, well, China, for instance, do what they've been doing for years. Nobody's ever stood up to them.
Right.
And I don't, at this point in my life, I don't want to learn Chinese.
You don't?
No.
Mm,
I really
that's shocking.
don't.
So, okay, yeah. So when I was talking to Jeremiah, you know, we're in the truck or in the tractor, and he's planting. He's also very distracted because, I mean, at one point I said to him, I'm like, I would suck so bad at this, because I just felt like all we did was just spin. Because, you know, literally we're going around sloughs. There's ton of standing water in that field. And he also was trying to focus, but at one point he looks at me, he's like, I feel like this is a sensitive subject, government subsidies. And I think, I'm like, okay, well, it might be sensitive. But to me, I think it makes some sense to say, to help people that have maybe no connection to farming, or just an arm's length from it, like in the sense that they eat, you know, but they don't really understand it. It's because I think there's a whole bill called the Farm Bill, and I think sometimes people get in their minds the idea that farmers are either pleased and they enjoy the fact that this is the reality, that they have to rely on the government, or that somehow you can game it. And I imagine you can, because with any program the government has, you can game the system, right? But I would say, like, that isn't the goal here. You know, you guys would much prefer not have to rely on the government and just.
Most of the people that I work with and know are farmers.
Yeah.
And they find satisfaction in planting a crop and nurturing it, watching it grow and harvesting.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting by the mailbox waiting for a check is not farming. And
yeah,
it naturally, any government program, any program of any kind with the government, there's abuses. And the sad part of any government program, if it's not policed or regulated, you see it all the time. If there is a program and it's not policed or regulated, then it gets abused. So the way the government fixes it, they eliminate it altogether.
Right.
Because it's being abused.
Right.
And the prevent plant in the early stages was abused, something terrible.
How? Can you give me like an example? Like the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So how did they abuse it?
Well, they abused it, but it was set up the way the regulations were. They weren't doing anything that wasn't illegal.
They weren't doing anything that was illegal, you mean?
That was illegal, right?
Right. They were exploiting loopholes that were there.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a typical government, you know, and if there was any question, if I'm selling you crop insurance and there's some questionable stuff that you're doing, I'm not going to say anything to you because I'm making money off of selling you insurance. So it wasn't policed, and then of course the regulations get tighter and tighter, and it's just human nature. You find a loophole and you use it.
Right, but in years like this, where you're talking 25%, and that's just here, and we're actually fortunate, right? Because there are other states like Nebraska, right, which
Right,
is
I mean-
it is an example, right? It has to be almost,
We're going around sloughs in a field that we can't plant, we can still go home to our house.
right,
There's some really bad situations in the
Right.
country.
right.
And, you know, the government's there to help in those situations, but that's a whole different animal.
What
than-
they're
than-
dealing with, right. So in a year like this, though, to have Prevent Plant to kind of fall back on for that's 25% less, I mean, it is significant.
Yes, it is. It's
You
very
know,
significant.
It's what's making it possible for you to go another year. I mean, not say that your whole operation would fall apart without it, but there are certainly people that probably would, right? That would fold without
Right.
that additional support.
And I mean, you can get into the debate of global warming and all that, and I'm not saying that our temperatures and our weather is changing. Whether man has caused it is another question, but you had, in the last 2 years, you've had extreme differences. Last year, we planted almost all our acres,
Right,
which was not a normal thing to do. We were planting through sloughs that we hadn't planted in a long time.
Mhm.
And this year, it's just completely opposite.
Well-
This year, we've got sloughs bigger than I've seen in all the years I've been farming.
which is crazy. And Jeremiah talked about the fact that it was, a lot of people think it's due to just a lot of snow throughout the winter, but it really started in the beginning of October
Right.
when we got like a foot, right? We got like a foot of snow
Mm-hmm.
on October 6th or 5th or something. I mean, it was the first week of October and we got drilled with snow, and then it never really.
Last year was a good, we planted the crop, it came up fast, temperatures were up, corn was totally tasseled by the end of July.
Right,
This year we'll be lucky to be knee high by the 4th of July, which was the old standard in the old days.
Yeah. right,
Now it's not out of the realm to have corn almost shoulder high by the 4th of July.
right.
It won't be this year. It was just a very unusual year, not just the wet, but the cold.
Yeah. It was brutal.
In our situation where we're no-tilling and the standing stalks, the frost didn't come out of that till way into the spring.
Yep.
So it was a challenge, and the whole year has been challenging. And then you combine that with the low commodity prices that we have,
Mhm.
and presents some issues.
Right. So this is the worst year you can remember in all your years of farming for moisture. Was it the hardest spring just all the way around or not? Can you think of one that was tougher?
Things are different, I was talking to a gentleman this afternoon, come and got some seed from us, and things are not like, we farm so much different, our equipment is so much different. You can go back to when you'd get stuck 5, 6, 7 times a day, and we have not been stuck this spring at all.
Yeah,
Because our equipment is better, we farm different than we used to.
right.
The no-till ground seems to be firmer, and you can drive on it better, and it just
Yeah, your whole
the whole operation has totally changed from like 1988 when everything burnt up. And back then, we had dirt blowing, and we don't have that anymore. Everything is changing, and it's for the better. By most
right.
concerns, I guess it's better. I think it's better anyway. The technology that we have now is just mind-blowing for what I've seen in my lifetime.
Well, like I said, I'm in the tractor with him, and I'm like, I don't even know where the hell we are. Like, as far as how you would know, but he's got a GPS map, right? That he's basically following.
Mhm.
I mean, it really is incredible. And I didn't pay enough attention as a young girl to what it was really like with you. You know, I just didn't, I wasn't out there a lot. And I'm not out there a lot now. But this was just one of those things where I was like, you know, I have an opportunity to share a little bit from what it looks like for us, and knowing full well that there are people that are like suffering.
Yep.
That's really, really bad. And I guess I just felt like we should just talk about it, because it's maybe isn't going to be interesting to anybody, but I think it's actually kind of interesting. The fact that it's so easy just to say, you know, pray for the farmers, it's a tough spring. Well, what does that even really mean? And to know that this is actually the wettest spring you can remember. You've been farming for how many years?
I started farming in '68.
Yeah, so 50 years, 51 years, right? I'm not really good at math on the fly, but I'm pretty sure it's 51. It's a really long time.
You know, it's when we get back and you visit about, you know, back in the '80s when we were raising sunflowers, we were working the ground.
Yeah.
And planting sunflowers with an old 8-row corn planter with markers, and the dirt would blow so bad that you couldn't see. You'd have to stop 2 or 3 times through the field for the dirt to quit blowing so you could see the mark ahead of you.
Yeah.
And now, if you were still farming in that same condition, you just push a button and let the tractor drag to the other end of the field.
Right.
Although we don't have dirt blowing like that anymore.
Right.
But things have changed so much that it's exciting to be involved in it. I've always appreciated being close to the land.
Yeah.
And watching God work.
Well, I'm trying to learn more, because I don't want to be ignorant of our family's business. There's so much I don't know, so much I don't understand. I mean, it's just not. But I'm gonna try to learn. I'm even fascinated, like looking at the actual implement. Like, I don't get this. Like, how does this actually work? You know, and Jeremiah explains it, and still my brain, it's just like, I don't get it, you know.
Well,
But I go back and look,
you know, it was a real epiphany for Jeremiah when he first came here to comprehend how a combine works.
I still don't comprehend how a combine works.
Well,
It's really fascinating.
It is
you know,
fascinating.
Like this last fall, I did a Facebook Live from the combine, and there were so many people that were like, I've never seen this before. You know, the view from the front of the cab of a combine is really cool, as you can see all the. But I still just my brain,
you know,
explodes, kind of.
All of the
really
integral parts that make it happen. You know, that's pretty interesting. But now the technology is such that it's weed control and the seeds that we have, the technology that we have. It's really it's amazing, and and it's a fine line, because most of the people don't understand how much better off we are now than we were back when the dirt was blowing. We didn't know any different. When we first started farming, it was you went out in Montana where they would summer fallow half of it.
I don't know what that means, Dad.
They would work the ground black and keep it black.
Really?
Half of it. And they'd farm the other half. And the reason they did that is by letting the land rest, you would gain moisture.
Sure.
But as you learn more of how the intricacies of the soil and the biology in the soil and everything work together, we were working against ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Because working the land like that just saps the moisture.
Zaps the moisture, but you're also destroying the biological communities that are living in the soil. Every time you work it, you disrupt them and they have to start over again. Right. Because they're the engine that provides the plants with all of the nutrients from the soil. They're the impetus of the breaking down the nutrients from the soil that's available to the plant. And so when I first started farming, that was, we were summer following. So if you see anything green out there, you run out and you work the whole field to kill anything because you want it black. Well, you're just defeating everything that the soil is designed to do.
Right.
Now we're putting cover crops because the soil was designed to have something growing on it all the time.
Right. That's
and the
why even
idea
in the lawn,
we've gotten away from diversity in our crop rotations, which is not good, but it's all a matter of economics.
Yep.
You raise corn and you raise soybeans.
right.
And the diversity that you should have, and if I was a younger man and I had livestock when I was younger, and I probably would never do it, but the people that have livestock that are raising feed and cover crops, and they're using a diverse crop mixture, which is what the soil needs, because the different biologies in the soil work off of different plants, different types of plants. So corn and soybeans is really not a sustainable
Rotation.
rotation.
Right.
That's the reason you rotate, because wheat does something to the soil that soybeans don't. And so the biology, it's a living organism, and it's just really, really fun the farther you get into it and realize. And,
You know what I really, I'm
and
so
old
glad-
habits are hard to break.
Oh yeah.
They're hard to break.
I think that there are times that agriculture gets a bad rap because of the commercialization of it, right? It's become big business, it's become big industry.
Right.
And I think with that, people
There's some
assume,
downside to that too.
Absolutely.
I agree.
absolutely, but I think, what you are demonstrating very clearly is that you care. You're a steward of the land that you farm. And I think more farmers are like you than not. Even if they've become big business, right? Even if they've become, just because you profit off of it doesn't mean you don't care about it.
Well, and I don't know if I've told you this before or not, but people that aren't connected to the land can't grasp what it means to be connected to the land. Because when you walk on a piece of ground and you farm a piece of ground for 50 years, there's a certain attachment to that. I can go out and probably come within 20 feet of where I was when I heard about the Twin Towers going down. I remember exactly where I was, exactly what I was doing, and where I was on this certain piece of ground.
Right.
There's an attachment. There's things that happen in your life that affect you that are tied directly to that piece of dirt, because you were there doing something on that dirt when this thing happened or whatever. And for people that don't have that connection, they can't grasp the connection to the land.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real benefit, I think.
Well, that's what makes you a steward of it. And that's why I was so excited to ask you some questions, because what I think is really good about your perspective is that no matter how hard things get, it'll, like modern day, it'll never be as hard as it was when you were first starting out. Some of the periods of time that you all went through.
Farming used to be, you go back 30 years and it was an integral part of our country.
Yeah.
It's not anymore.
Right.
The farther people get away from the land, the farther they become.
They just become disenfranchised and disassociated from it.
So.
I know, and I know that there's maybe some legitimate, like we were saying, concerns with modernized farming, the commercialization of agriculture. I can respect that, and some of the concerns with some of the pesticides, herbicides, things that are used. I can respect that, but that's for a different day.
Yeah.
I just thought this would be hopefully valuable. So thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts there.
You're welcome, sis.